Welcome to the first post-election edition of Red Meat, unless you live in Minnesota. I'm Jim Geraghty, along with, as always, Mark Hemingway. Mark, you have been following the Senate race that will not end and that will continue. Is now, we're now 1 month from Election Day. Every once in a while, we get new numbers. It seems like they're drawing them out of a lottery bin or something like that. But it seems like Republican Senator Norm Coleman is ahead. Should Republicans be feeling confident?
I think the odds are definitely in Coleman's favor, but the margin is still so small, and there's still so many ballots to count that, who knows what could happen. I mean, there could be any kind of irregularities. They could find, an extra 200 ballots, in the last day stuffed in the bottom of a, box they didn't see before that, could put things over the top. I mean, you're talking about I think, I don't know what it was. I don't know what the exact margin what we're up to today, but, it was 340 votes just a day or two ago. So, who knows? But the Franken camp is very definitely trying to spin this pretty hard, and that's usually a pretty good indication that things are not going well for them.
Well, something that kind of has surprised me is that, despite the closeness of this race, it really hasn't turned into a rallying cry for the left. This is not Florida 2000 all over again. They're not pounding the table. Is there something you can read into that, or?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of people and a lot of Democrats smartly would not be thrilled about Al Franken in the Senate. I've had a number of personal interactions with Al Franken. I interviewed him years ago, and I can tell you I know exactly why. He, even his friends will tell you, people that he refers you to for a good opinion of himself will tell you that he is a difficult person. I think that there's, it's not just that they don't want, every Hollywood celebrity, and their dog running to fill the Senate in every Democratic slot, self-funding their campaigns. It's also just that Franken's a difficult person, and they're and they're afraid of any number of things that could happen there. But also it's just the post-Obama enthusiasm. There isn't as much enthusiasm as there once was. Had they had a runoff system, say like they had in the Saxby-Chambliss race, I have a feeling the result would be pretty similar. The only reason Franken was in this and it was that close was because of this Obama enthusiasm and the general election turnout and all that. I mean, all in all, I think the state is still pretty much more aligned with Norm Coleman and his temperament and his politics than Al Franken.
A confident statement for the state that elected Jesse Ventura. Now, a little bit earlier, you had mentioned Hollywood celebrities, dogs, and difficult people. And that seems like a natural segue to Chris Matthews, who is considering running for the Senate in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Probably, I guess, questioning the sanity of the Keystone State voters. Is this something we should have seriously on our radar screen, or do you think this is just kind of a negotiating ploy or just a desperate cry for attention from a man who already is on MSNBC 30 hours a day?
If I wasn't already convinced that Chris Matthews is utterly insane, I might be tempted to be more dismissive of it. But the fact of the matter is while there's no fire there, there's a whole lot of smoke going on right now. The Politico seems all over the story, and then they seem bound and determined to will it into existence if it's not happening. So there's a lot of people talking, and again, I think Chris Matthews is frankly capable of anything. So
I was going to say, I guess the question will be: do Keystone State voters want someone who will just yell at people in the Senate? Mark, what do you think the answer is? Because I'm going to cut you off there to let you know, hey, because that's the Chris Matthews style, and I just don't know if people how do you go from Arlen Specter to Chris Matthews.
Yeah. On the other hand, Pennsylvania is always a pretty close state in terms of Democratic Republicans. So, again, we could, getting back to the theme of celebrities or dogs, we could run a dog as a Democrat and probably come pretty darn close to Arlen Specter in the final election. So, that it's Chris Matthews with its plus or minuses, it's going to be close either way. So it's just a question of whether or not Matthews can shoot himself in the foot. But you also point out, and this is a big thing, usually it's as we saw with Barack Obama, our new president, it's generally desirable not to have much of a record, often when you're running for a high office like this. And Chris Matthews has, in addition to having worked on the Hill before, has, my gosh, thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of television with him commenting on specific policy issues. My guess is the RNC's video editor is going to have carpal tunnel syndrome by the time they get through with a Matthews campaign, editing all the stupid stuff that Matthews has said over the years. And so why that's not a bigger liability in his mind, I don't quite know.
Well, this would, that strange behavior on the part of Chris Matthews is not something we can necessarily rule out in the future. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future returns. Speaking of future returns, I was thinking of buying 3 automakers earlier this week. Apparently, you can get 3 of them at a really reasonable price. Or you out there may be buying it yourself if the auto bailout hearings are, continue apace. Mark, you've been keeping one eye on this, and it's just rather bizarre to think that once 3 great companies are now in the possibility of just having wheelbarrows of cash given to them, essentially from the government. Theoretically, it's a bridge loan, but people are skeptical of the payback. What do you make of the auto bailout?
Well, I hope everyone out there is paying attention because you will never, ever hear me say this again. But Michael Moore said an interesting thing the other day where he pointed out that if something like right now, the way things are, you could buy every common, share of GM stock for like $3 billion, and throwing $30 billion at the company, to just as a bailout when, theoretically the opportunities out there are either by the government or, God forbid, or some private entity to come in there and, redo the management situation, which has, been the major problem there. So
I'm a little wary that the whole reason the bailout got sunk 2 weeks ago was entirely because they took the private jets. That had nothing to do with the quality of the company. It seemed to be this entire PR image, which is why people didn't like it, as opposed to the actual, nuts and bolts of the deal.
That is something to do with it. I mean, there are, aside from the fact that the union obligations are just crushing and make them, totally uncompetitive. Actually, the auto industry in the United States is booming. It's just it's foreign nameplate manufacturing. From Toyota and all these other things. I mean, they find American workers great. They pay them an incredible living wage, and they're great companies to work for. And Toyota and Honda and all these other companies are opening up, these plants all over America. It's just the big 3 American auto manufacturers actually that are, are really can't keep up with the union obligations. But more than that, the other big problem in the auto industry is that they have horrible management, and they have these legacy executives. In this case, let me put this in perspective for you. The Ford family also owns the Detroit Lions, to tell you how good managers
roughly
they
as
are.
successful
Yes,
as
exactly.
the big 3 these days.
So what you have is a series of multi-generational sort of legacy executives that have been running these companies in the ground for a long time. I would also note there's another interesting fact. The only major industry in America that is quite that filled with the same number of legacy executives as newspapers. And we can see how well they're doing as well. So there needs to be some sort of total management overhaul, I would say, to make those companies successful. I mean, I don't, frankly, despite the complaints, I've rented enough Detroit cars over the past couple of years that I don't think they're bad cars. They drive well, they look nice. It's just that they're not competitively priced, and that's what's really killing them. And they need to find a way out of the situation they're in. And I don't think they're going to find that. Even if you do get rid of the union obligation, you still have the problem of bad management, and you have to deal with it from both ends.
I was struck by in the GMAC proposal, or the GM proposal of how they're going to restructure the company and all these steps they're going to take to make themselves more competitive. The GMAC, the financing branch of trying to help people buy their cars, was going to be applying for some of the bailout money that is set out for the financial service industry.
Of course.
To me, there's nothing more reassuring to Congress than to say, hey, don't worry, we're branching into the last industry you had to bail out with billions of dollars.
Well, Harvard lost $8 billion of its endowment in the stock market recently, so we should be looking at an Ivy League bailout too. We figured out a few other ways we can compound this.
Reassuring to know that the National Review bailout is not on the radar screen for now. But you know what? We're having fundraising week, so maybe that'd be a good time for you to hit that little jar up there. So anyway, for Jim Geraghty, along with Mark Hemingway, we are glad to be back with Red Meat, and you can look forward to more of us in this space in the not-too-distant future. Thanks for watching.